Hey, Wellness Big Sisters. Welcome back to the Wellness Big Sister podcast. We've got exciting spring cleaning, detoxification, immunity, all of the fun sort of sciencey wellness chats today. I thought it'd be fun to do sort of, it's April and spring cleaning is this huge sort of category and trend right now, and we often think about it as like spring cleaning our ingredients in our house, such as like cleaning products, or spring cleaning our closets and getting rid of the old, bringing in the new. But I thought it'd be fun to also spring clean our bodies, right? Detoxify our bodies and talk about our body's built-in detoxification system, its immune system, its lymphatic system. So we'll cover all of the good sort of detoxification for our body, all the good spring cleaning for our bodies today. I needed to break this up into part one and part two. I wanted to do sort of a spring cleaning for the entire body, but I realized this part one is already super extensive. And so part two will come in a few weeks once it'll be part of the May newsletter too. But it'll be more about sort of like dopamine detoxes and brain detoxes and spring cleaning for our minds, our environment, and our brains, where this is more for the body. So, what is our lymphatic system? Let's start there, right? The lymphatic system, the way that I like to think about it, is our body's detoxification system, immunity system. It's kind of what I like to think about as the silent cool girl, right? Like the one who is waiting for an invite to the cool girl table because it's not talked about often enough. And we hear things such as like ice rolling for our face to clear out the lymph and detoxify our bodies, dry brush, all of those sorts of things. But no one really truly understands the lymphatic system. And I see a lot of poor marketing in regards to our lymphatic system. And not poor marketing, maybe it's really good marketing, but marketing that's not actually related to how our lymphatic system works. So that's what we'll talk about today, because our lymphatic system is one of the primary systems involved in sort of spring cleaning for our body. So to start off, again, we always get micro first. We always go over the science, and then at the end, I'll give you some sort of actionable things to do to help our own detoxification, our own lymphatic system, our own spring cleaning for our bodies, right? So when I talk about detoxification in the lymphatic system, what I'm really talking about is the body's ability to remove waste. And that is primarily related to our lymphatic system, right? Our lymphatic system also is in charge of sort of fluid balance. So we're not swelling up like balloons or like shriveling up like what we do in the pool, right? Or like little raisins, right? So it's in charge of immunity, removal of waste and foreign invaders, and then also fluid balance. So the lymphatic system's made up, the primary sort of fluid that helps remove those wastes and foreign invaders and all of those pathogens is called lymph. So lymph is what flows through our lymphatic vessels. We can think about it as, blood flows through our vasculature, oxygenated blood in our arterioles, in our arterial system, and then deoxygenated blood in our venous system. So lymph is the actual fluid that flows through our lymphatic system. And we have lymphatic vessels just like we have blood vessels, right? So we can think about it very similarly. If you're having a hard time imagining what our lymphatic system is, we can think of it very similarly to our cardiovascular system. And as a matter of fact, it links heavily with our cardiovascular system because it helps sort of, again, remove some of that waste, take it through some different checkpoints along the lymphatic system, and then also bring it back into our circulatory system so that we're not losing all of this waste. So lymph is the primary fluid, and then we also have these lymphatic vessels that help to move that fluid along. So lymph is created by excess fluid and excess waste from different processes that we have in our bodies. So our cardiovascular system, right? As we're transferring that oxygenated blood in that arterial system and then delivering that towards other areas of our body, and then it goes into that deoxygenated blood, that venous system, we lose waste throughout that process. At that super small capillary level, we lose a little bit of fluid and we lose a little bit of waste at that level. So the lymphatic system is there, all these little vessels to weave in and out in order to pick up that waste. And that way we're not losing significant amounts of fluid as we're sort of transitioning between that arterial system and that venous system. So that's one of the ways and one of the things that make up our lymph fluid is that excess fluid from that transition between that arterial oxygenated blood system, and then our venous system, which is that deoxygenated blood. So that's number one. The second place that we get lymph is from all of our cells go through this sort of different processes, right? Metabolic processes where we're creating things, we're transitioning things, we're building things, and all of that has waste products involved, and they all sort of kind of coagulate at this what we call interstitial fluid. And so lymph is also made up of the waste products, the extracellular, like the interstitial fluid that comes from these different cellular processes. So it's both from the circulatory system and then also from our individual cells. And all of these things, the lymph vessels sort of flow in and out of these things and constantly sort of picking up little microorganisms and chemicals and waste products and fluid to help sort of transition it through our lymphatic system. That way, again, that we're not losing too much fluid throughout these waste products, and that we're also sensing those foreign invaders in that waste, and we're picking that up in that lymphatic system. So it flows throughout our lymphatic vessels, right? So the lymph sort of brings all of these pathogens and foreign invaders throughout our lymphatic vessels, and they reach sort of these checkpoints, which are called lymph nodes. And again, most of us have probably heard lymph nodes, but I like to think of them as sort of like TSA pre-check, right? So that lymphatic fluid, that lymph, goes all the way through the lymphatic vessels until it reaches this TSA pre-check and checkpoint, right? Where we sort of analyze each of these microorganisms, and our body tags different foreign invaders and different substances and pathogens that we might not recognize, right, in order to mount an immune response. And so we have sort of these checkpoints, right, these cluster of vessels, and we can actually feel them. There's some in our like armpits, you can feel them. Sometimes you can feel them in the back of your knee. A lot of the time underneath your like chin area here, and then also in your groin. Like your groin is one of the primary places that you can kind of feel those sort of nodules in those lymph nodes. So I think of that as sort of that TSA pre-check, right? So they check for foreign invaders and waste, and then they help to break them down and get rid of them. Within this sort of system, we also have these cells that act as sort of like tattletales, right? That tag these foreign invaders and sort of signal to our lymphatic system like, hey, foreign invader, like this is waste, this is a pathogen, whatever. We need to mount an immune response to attack them and to clear them out, right? So it's in charge of, our lymph nodes are in charge of this checkpoint, and then they're also in charge of sort of helping to mount that immune system response. So our lymphatic system is also responsible for creating certain cells that help us to fight these pathogens and foreign invaders. So as it moves past the lymph nodes, once it gets cleared from the lymph nodes, or once it gets broken down because it's a waste product, and then the lymph fluid is cleared from that lymph node, it goes up into the sort of keeps going along the pathway, and then it eventually returns back into our circulatory system so that we're able to maintain that fluid balance, right? And so it just slowly moves along the pathway, most often from like our limbs into our trunks, back to our heart, back to our circulatory system, right? So that's sort of the general pathway of the lymphatic system, right? We also have like two main organs and areas of development for our lymphatic system. One of them's our thymus, and the other one's our bone marrow. And I like to think of these as sort of college for our immune cells. So these guys are in charge of creating, maturing, weeding out certain lymphocytes and different immune-based cells to help us attack. That way, when we have these foreign invaders and these waste products and these pathogens that our body needs to target, we're able to recruit the best of the best, right? So thymus and bone marrow, I like to think about as like college for these cells, right? Where they're able to mature, they're able to learn, they're able to grow, and then they're also able to get weeded out if they're not good enough for us, right? So in general, that's sort of the sciencey, the micro perspective of our lymphatic system. So lymph fluid is important, lymphatic vessels, which we can think about similarly to our blood vessels, and then lymph nodes, again, that TSA pre-check, and then our thymus and our bone marrow, which are responsible for college for those immune cells, right? That way it helps us with our immunity, it helps us with the fluid balance, and then it helps us to get rid of those waste products. So from a sort of micro perspective, that's our lymphatic system. That's our body's built-in detoxification system. our built-in sort of spring cleaning system. And that system, like all the other systems in our body, it can get impaired, right? So there can be things that go wrong with that system. And that's when we get sort of backup and swelling, or decreased hydration, or something along those lines, where our fluid balance is off, our immunity is decreased, right? We're getting sick a little bit more, or our body's not able to attack those pathogens and foreign invaders as well. So a few of the things that can happen to our lymphatic systems that sort of put us at a disadvantage, right, when it comes to spring cleaning and detoxification in our bodies is backup. So I mentioned that in general, lymph flows from our limbs all the way back to the heart. So it flows what we call distal to proximal. And a lot of time it flows against gravity, right? Because all of these sort of processes happen, they have to happen all throughout our bodies. And then it slowly sort of moves back closer and closer to the heart for that lymph to get deposited back into our circulatory system. So each sort of TSA pre-check along the way, TSA checkpoint, are different lymph node vessels. So in general, if there's backup in some of this TSA area, right, just like at the airport, if there's backup there, there's going to be backup along the rest of the path, right? So problems occur when some of our lymph nodes or some of that TSA checkpoint area is too overloaded or too backed up or not cleared enough, and then that creates swelling along the rest of that pathway. So, for example, like the groin area, heavily involved with those lymph nodes, like a heavy TSA pre-checkpoint, right? But if there's swelling or congregation or a backup of the system at our groin region, that's going to create swelling oftentimes throughout our whole lower, like one lower extremity, right? So if it's our left, it'll create swelling in our left lower extremity. And same thing with the right, right? So we want to make sure that each of these areas of checkpoints are cleared up. That way, lymph can flow fluidly throughout our lymphatic system and back into the heart. So, backup is a huge issue. And one of the ways that we can kind of tell if our system's backed up is through swelling and what we call pitting. So, we have sort of a way to test how our lymphatic system is working through pressing a fingerprint into, most often we do it distally, which means closer to towards our limbs. But we press in, and if your fingerprint is able to make an indent and stay there, that could be indicative of your lymphatic system being an issue, right? So any sort of swelling, any sort of pitting is when we really want to look at our lymphatic system. So the reason sort of the swelling can happen too is that our lymph flows pretty much against gravity. So it's having to work against gravity. And unlike our sort of vasculature, especially our arterial system, like lymph vessels are pretty weak, I guess, if you could say. Like they don't have the strength in the walls. They're pretty pliable and flexible, right? So they don't have as much of a pressure gradient to send the lymph back up to the heart. They have one-way valves that help, but those valves can get a little bit they're just a little bit more flexible, so they're not able to fully like close. Lymph can like flow back towards the ground, right, against like, or with gravity per se. So we get into the issue with just how the lymph system is built, and that it's a little bit more flexible. And so we need the right pressure and activation of those vessels in the surrounding muscles in order to help push that lymph back up to the heart. Same thing with our venous system, right? Same thing with that deoxygenated system and like pumping the fluid back up to the heart. So the fact that lymph has to flow against gravity is a huge way for our system to sort of get a little bit compromised in regards to spring cleaning and detox. If you have chronic swelling or pitting, that's when everything sort of gets overloaded. So you might have backups at multiple areas of lymph nodes throughout your body, or you might have multiple areas of pitting, and it's really just where the entire system is like, hey, we are overloaded. We are trying to maintain your immune response. We're trying to keep the fluid balance. That way you don't swell up like a balloon and feel all puffy. We're trying to clear out waste and pathogens and all these things. And because your body is not able to take care of it for whatever reason, that's when you might see some of the chronic swelling or the chronic pitting. So as far as sort of problems that can occur, that's a lot of the time where this happens. And again, from the immune standpoint, there's a lot of other ways that problems can occur, especially with sort of overproduction of some cells, or the bad white blood cells, or the cells that aren't able to attack our foreign invaders as well. So that's sort of a whole separate thing, not related to the fluid balance component. But there's, from the immune standpoint, there's definitely some things that can also go wrong there too. So in order to help our lymphatic system and in order to help sort of that spring cleaning for our body, there's a lot of things that we can do for free, right? And most of it involves helping that lymph to move along the pathway in the right way, fluidly, without any backups occurring. And so the ways that we can address our lymphatic system are through helping those lymph nodes, helping those lymph vessels, helping that lymph fluid to just keep on going throughout the pathway without getting too backed up in one area or another, right? So I go through all of this in the Wellness Big Sister blog, where I actually have videos related to lymphatic massage and sort of body scans and different things along those lines. So take a look at those if you want like a more formal video, but I'll also describe them here. So one of the best things we can do, and you can totally do this yourself, although it's super nice if someone else can help you too, is a lymphatic massage. And so there's a few key things to note with the lymphatic massage. One of them, and probably the most important one, being that the lymphatic system lies really close to our skin. So we call it really superficial. Our muscular system is a little deeper, right? And so that's where we get into that deep tissue massage, right? But for the lymphatic system and for lymphatic massage, we want to keep it light. It's close to the skin. It's really superficial. And so this is where I see a lot of the marketing and just poor marketing done on the lymphatic system, or not poor marketing again, but like the poor science behind it is like when people target the lymphatic system, they're like, this is lymphatic massage, and they're doing it with a significant amount of effort and force, when in reality that's not targeting the lymphatic system. So we have to have light pressure where it's just simple sort of strokes. The other thing that I see that's wrong with sort of how lymphatic system is portrayed and lymphatic massage is portrayed is that people often think to start like at the foot or start at the hand or whatever. Like it just kind of makes sense to brush the fluid up. But I told you earlier, remember the lymph nodes, they have to move through each checkpoint, right? And so if the lymph nodes at the armpits aren't cleared, then they're going to back up the elbows. So we usually start lymphatic massage proximally, so close into the body. So we'll start again closer to the trunk, clear out those lymph nodes, those TSA pre-checkpoints, and then slowly move distally or more towards our limbs, right? So that's the two sort of important factors when it comes to lymphatic massage. Again, I have a video on this. Check out the Wellness Big Sister blog on my website, and it'll link it to the video. I'll try and put a link to it here. That way you can have access to it. That way you can do it on your own. But again, it's also super, super helpful for someone else to be able to do it on you too. That way, because it's hard to get your back, it's hard to get your glutes, like it's just harder on your own, but we can still do it, right? Dry brushing, similar thought pattern behind it, and then also similar pattern of performance, right? So we want to perform the dry brushing closer into the trunk before we go further out. And dry brushing in general helps to sort of ease the pressure. So we're not getting that super intense, heavy pressure dry brushing. We're able to sort of lightly move that lymph fluid along. So dry brushing and lymphatic massage I put under the same category as sort of mechanical movement of that fluid and helping to clear out some of these areas of like lymph nodes and of the TSA pre-checkpoints, right? The other thing that we can do, again, comes into the fluid balance situation, and that's stay hydrated, right? Like we're absorbing all of these little microorganisms, these foreign invaders, these pathogens, these waste products. And in order to healthily move it up the system, we have to have the appropriate hydration for it. And if our cells aren't able to lubricate that area or to have that diffusion, that transfer of fluid with those foreign invaders inside of it, then we're going to get a backup because there's more concentration of organisms without as much or waste products without as much fluid surrounding it, right? So there can be kind of a backup and a clog in that way. So staying hydrated is super duper important. The other thing, exercise. So exercise and then compression is the last one too, and these kind of go hand in hand. So exercise helps to contract the muscles in order to create a pressure gradient for lymph fluid to continue to move up the system. So I said the lymph vessels are very flexible, right? And so that muscular contraction, that sort of like increasing and decreasing in size of muscles with exercise and with contraction helps to sort of provide this pumping motion to keep sending that lymph fluid up and up in the system, with these one-way valves sort of stopping it, right? As it sort of wants to flow down, and then you contract the muscles again and it pumps back up. Similar with the venous system, right? With the deoxygenated blood side of the circulatory system, the same thing applies, where we want to use those muscles to help create that external gradient of pressure in order to move that lymph fluid along. The last one, compression, a lot of the times this muscles are more like intrinsic, right? Compression, we think about like my leggings that I have on right now, or compression socks or something like that. Since the lymphatic system is close to the skin, a lot of the times like compression garments or compression socks, or a lot of nurses or people who are on their feet a lot wear compression socks, is because it creates sort of this external pressure to keep the lymphatic system strong, right? To keep that external pressure on the lymphatic system so that these vessels are able to, again, have that sort of pumping motion up, moving that lymph fluid along and up the system, right? So muscles, I like to think of that internal lymphatic management, and then compression is more of that external lymphatic system management, where we're applying that pressure externally. Both are super helpful, especially compression when traveling, exercise all the time, right? But especially because that lymph has to flow against gravity, and so creating that pressure in any way, both internally and externally, is going to help, right? I think I used the example of a like toothpaste tube in the Wellness Big Sis blog post that I did on this. But if you think about it, if you're trying to get toothpaste out of a tube that has not very much toothpaste in it, but is like super large, right? So if the toothpaste tube is like as big as my laptop or whatever, and you're trying to get this little bit of toothpaste back out of the tube, it's a whole lot harder to do compared to if you roll up the edge and then just slowly use pressure to push it through, right? Same thing applies with the muscle contraction and external compression, right? It's a lot easier to move that fluid along and move those contents of the toothpaste tube along when the vessel is the right size in order to create that pressure gradient, right? So that's sort of the visual that I have in mind when it comes to this, and it helps me sort of remember the purpose for each, right? So in general, that's sort of our lymphatic system, our detox system, the science behind it, the mechanisms involved, the lymph fluid, the lymph nodes, like all of the things that are involved in our lymphatic system, our detox system, and then problems that can happen and how we can address them. So if you're looking for videos, I have the lymphatic massage. Again, I'll try and link it here, but that way you guys can have access to it and then be able to help your lymph system yourself, right? The other things, as far as what I like to think about as spring cleaning, and this is not necessarily related to our lymphatic system, but especially in this time where we're sort of like refocusing, right? It's Q2, right? We're into the like second quarter of the year. It's a nice check-in on our goals, right? So checking back in on sort of like journaling basically about our whatever you call them, like resolutions or manifestations or goals for the year. Like I like to take this time to also think and check in, like, how are my goals doing? Refocus where I need to refocus, modify depending on circumstances that we've had happen over the last 3 months, right? You could have had something that came out of way out of left field when it came to your goals that you had set for the year. So sort of refocusing and modifying those goals to meet where you are right now. Or if it needs to be more of a discipline thing where you're like, hey, I have been slacking in this area and I should not be, sort of giving yourself that sort of hard pep talk on ways to refocus and realign towards your goals. So I like to think of that as sort of spring cleaning as well. And then the other thing I like to do, and again, I'll link the video for this too, but I call it a body scan. And it's a way to sort of check in. Sometimes we can just like go through the motions of things, especially when it comes to workouts where we're moving and we're working out, but we're not necessarily paying attention to how our body feels or how we're moving. And so this body scan, and again, I'll link the video, it's a guided body scan, but we go through each joint and each range of motion. I think it's like 15 minutes, so it's super quick, but it's a nice sort of check-in on like, okay, how are my wrists feeling? Am I feeling stiff in one way or the other when it comes to my hips or my rib cage or my low back or something like that? So I like to take this time to also do a body scan of like, okay, I work out weekly, like I have this consistent routine, but this is a time to sort of check in and see how is my body feeling with these movements and with this workout. So that is also something that I'll link in the description here, but if not, it'll be in the Wellness Big Sister blog post, and it's like directly linked there if you guys want to take a look at that. So we have a sort of April spring cleaning challenge that I like to call it, body spring cleaning challenge, and it's just doing one of those self lymphatic massages sometime this month, and then one body scan this month. Journaling's optional. Again, if you like to write down your goals, that's totally fine. I tend to like to, just take a check-in and see where I'm at, but lymphatic massage once and body scan once, just so we can sort of, again, learn and apply knowledge about our lymphatic system and about our body's detox system, but then also take a look at our movements, right? Have a sort of spring cleaning in regards to our movements. So I hope those resources help. I hope you guys got a lot out of the spring cleaning sort of body episode, right? We're going to go over spring cleaning for the mind and dopamine detoxes and all of those sorts of things in one of the episodes coming up. So I hope you're looking forward to that. If you want to sign up for our newsletter that sort of covers all of this and sends out the blog post with it and gets even more sciencey and more detailed, and that way you can sort of refer back to it in written form, you can sign up at our website. We'd love to have you. But again, spring cleaning, detox, body style, I think it's super fun, in addition to some of the environmental closet clean outs, all of the other spring cleaning stuff that we're doing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, and I'll see you guys again for the next Wellness Big Sister podcast.